Welcome to episode 8 of the Dishy Switch Podcast. On this podcast, we catch you up on South African ultimate developments and what's been happening internationally. If you like what we do here, please consider subscribing, hitting the like button so the algorithm can be kind to us, and hitting that notification bell icon so you can be notified when we post new videos. Just so you know, we post every second Sunday, 7 o'clock South African time, SAST. You can also follow us on Instagram. We have our account handle is at Dishy_Switch. We post some clips from our episodes and just remind you that we've been posting new stuff. So with the intro out the way, I'm switching to Dylan for the news.
Hey everyone. So this week, in terms of local news, pickup has kind of started more in full swing. We spoke about that last week. But from what I've heard, there's more official pickup being played everywhere now, almost every Monday and Wednesday. From what I know, teams have started kind of the more prehab kind of trainings. I know my team has started that. And yeah, so nothing too serious happening there. In terms of SAFTA news, SAFTA and the TOC are currently making the decision of hosting nationals, and that would be in June. Currently the decision being made is whether or not the amount of teams that have said yes that they can go is enough for the tournament to happen. In terms of international news, well, nothing new has come up this week, or in the last 2 weeks, but when anything does, we'll keep you updated. So today we have a guest on. Her name is Cherise Carrera. She is my sister. And she is what I would say an elite level athlete. She is a track and field athlete, but also does some cross country during the off season. Currently her main event is 3000 Steeplechase. She started participating properly when she was in university, which is about 6 years ago now or longer. Well, she started before, but took it slightly more seriously from then. And today just comes to bring some insight on nutrition, ultimate, and of course her own training. So let's go over to the interview. Cherise, welcome to the Dishy Switch Podcast. It's good to have you here as my bigger yet smaller than me sister.
Thanks, Bill. Thanks for the intro. Thanks for having me here.
So you're not an ultimate player, but that's okay. I still love you. The rest of them might not. But I consider you somewhat of an elite level athlete, and a physio. And ultimate players love physios. So we're going to ask you a few questions kind of on those two subjects today, and hopefully relate them a little bit back to ultimate. So just the kind of first general question is, as a competitive athlete, what does your general training week look like?
So I run, obviously. So I run every day, twice a day. I do an easy run in the mornings, just like we call it like a recovery run. And then the evenings, I either have a slightly longer run or I have a harder session. And then two to three times a week, I'm in the gym, either with my bio or just doing extra other sort of activations and gym work. Then Saturday is either easy day or a race day, and Sunday is a long run. So generally I don't have a day off. Sometimes a Saturday, but really that's my week for you.
How many Ks do you do in a week, average?
It obviously varies in the season. I had a bit of a niggle. So I had a bit of an injury coming into the season, so we're not quite doing the mileage that we used to. But when I'm training properly, it's about 140 to 150 Ks a week. At the moment, I'm only at about 120, so I'm not 125. I'm not quite where I normally am at this part of the season. But yeah, we're working up slowly and just trying to do it in a good way that I don't get hurt.
I love how you say we're taking it slowly, yet I'm doing 125 Ks a week. Those two words don't seem to go together. Anyway.
I get tired from driving 100.
Yeah, it doesn't just happen overnight. Yeah, in the beginning, it can. Now that I've started increasing my Ks again, I'm like, oh my word, I can't believe I used to do this so much more than this. But it does start becoming easier and easier as you constantly hit those weeks of 140 Ks. Then it just feels normal. But starting to get back into it is the difficult part.
So I just want to pick up on two things Dill started the conversation with. One is he said that ultimate players love physios, but I think physios love ultimate players more because it's a lot of business, especially where we're from. And then the other thing is Dill alluded that you are an elite level athlete. You're wearing South African kit. Can you just inform us on what level you compete at, what levels have you competed at, and what is your history? How do you represent being an elite athlete?
So I was a little bit of a later into track and field. So at university, I ran at school, and at university, I really started putting in a lot more hard work and improving a lot. And I think in my second year at university, I won my first national medal, so South African medal. And each year, I just kind of improved on that. And I think in 2014, I won my first national title in SA Under 23, wow. And then I got my first senior medal after that. And then I was the 2 times national champion for the steeplechase and the national champion for the 10,000 meter on the track. And then after that, I got selected to run for South Africa at our Africa Championships. And if you're a middle or long distance runner, you know that running at Africa Championships is like running at a World Championships, because you're running against the Kenyans and the Ethiopians, and they are basically the best in the world. So for me, it was quite an insane experience just to be running against basically the best in the world. And then I've also had the privilege of representing South Africa on cross country, which is probably one of my favorite things, is running cross country. So on cross country, we run a 10K. So it's I wouldn't say it's like trail running. It's a lot more grass, and it's up and down the whole time, but it's not in the mountains, if I can say that. It's normally they try and make it very spectator friendly. So you running around fields, but they've thrown in some mud patches and hopping over hay barrels and whatever they want to throw into it, they do. But yeah, so that's also the other place that I've run for South Africa, in 2018. Yeah, so that would be my slow kind of work to get to the more elite level in South Africa.
So how do you become that elite level athlete? What is the kind of mentality shift or physical body shift like? What did you do to get there?
It just comes down, I think, to hard work. I think especially in South Africa, I mean, I know it's the same with ultimate, you don't have full-time ultimate players. In South Africa, we do have some full-time athletes, but it's not a sport that's, there's not a lot of money put into athletics in South Africa. So to get to a competitive level, pure commitment of your planning and commitment of your time. So, I mean, you have to, if you want to be running on elite level, 99% of people are training twice a day. They're in the gym in the week. It is just like a pure commitment and planning your time well, because I'm up at 5 a.m. every day, train again after work every day, and it's a lot to balance. So you have to just be really good with planning your time, and just really wanting it, because I mean, at the end of a long work day, the last thing you sometimes feel like doing is just going to do your training session, but it has to be done. Like, there's no excuses. You put in the work, and in the end of the day, that's the only way anyone's going to reach a high level. There's no shortcuts to success. And especially long distance running or middle distance running, you can't hide your fitness. The only way you're going to show up on that line in a good shape is if you've put in the kilometers and you've really put in the work. South Africa's running is really increasing. So that mental shift of, we might not be full-time athlete, but I still see it as my second job. I really do, because it's so easy. If you don't see it as your second job, it's easy to make an excuse. I don't get paid a lot to do this, but I do have some sponsors behind me, and I want to represent them well, and I want to represent my club that I run for well. And the only way that I'm able to represent them well is if I perform, and I can only perform if I put in the work. So I think that's also something you have to decide is, okay, cool, I have a training session set for today. I've already had a really long day. I've had a lot on my plate. I'm tired. I don't feel like doing it, but I still show up and do it. And that's because I know, again, it's my second job and people are counting on me to do this. So I think that change in mindset. It's not just a hobby for me. It's kind of like a job. Still love it though, just to say that, even though it's a job.
Yeah, back in.
So from my, sorry, I'll go for it.
I was gonna say, back in my day, I remember going to the gym at 8 p.m. to go train. Slightly more difficult now, but I remember putting in those hours. Not nearly as much as you, not 140 Ks a week, but it was something. I felt good about it.
You do feel a sense of achievement where you're like, you know what, I'm getting this stuff done. Like, cool. Like, I didn't feel like doing it, but afterwards you never regret doing it. That's the thing. Like, sitting on the couch might seem like a good idea at the time, but afterwards you're always like, oh, I should have just gone and done it. So yeah, you never regret a good workout. Well, you never regret any workout, even if it was a bad one.
There's so much that I want to ask you about from what you've said there. But before we touch on the mental stuff, I want to ask you about basically two questions. And one is, so from my understanding, and when we coach national teams and that kind of thing, gym plays a big role in taking players from being competitive athletes to being elite athletes. And we spoke a little off air about your experience, training in a gym and what that looks like. So first, I want to ask you about what your thoughts are on that point that I proposed to you, which is, in my opinion, going from a competitive athlete to elite athlete, gym work plays a role, especially from your understanding for Ultimate. And then the second question is also gym related. How do you, is part of the reason you do go to the gym not only running related, but considering it you do steeplechase, you have to jump, you have to take impact from when you land in the water hazard and those kind of things? Or does that factor into the thinking at all?
Yeah, so I think gym is an essential part of taking that step up in your sporting career. I think as a social athlete, you can get away with not going to the gym and not being strong in that aspect. But in the long run, in any sporting career, the most important thing is consistency. So staying away from injuries and stuff, because injuries take you away from being consistent in your training. And the only way to be consistent in your training is to obviously be injury free. And the only way to be injury free is to be in the gym, because most of us, 99.9% of people, have so many little weaknesses that we don't know about. And all those weaknesses come out when you're increasing the intensity of your training or the mileage in your training. As soon as you increase training, you can no longer hide any weaknesses, because any little weakness that you have will come out when you increase your load. There's no place to hide it. And so that's why it's so important to spend time. And most times it's the most stupid exercises that seem like it's not doing anything. You're like, I don't understand why I have to do these stupid clamshells or these activations before I start. But those little things are the things that professional athletes are spending time on, and that's the reason that they don't get injured, and it's the reason that they're able to train consistently and then perform at that high level. And I think it's a part that we often neglect. A lot of people spend some time in the gym, but and this is something we spoke about off air, but you spend so much time in the gym, but you're actually doing your exercises so wrong that even though you're spending an hour in the gym, you've the whole time only worked your quads. Even though you were doing a leg day and you thought you were working your glutes and your hamstrings, you were activating your muscles so wrong that you weren't actually working all the muscles that you thought you were. And I think that's a big problem that we have as athletes as well. Is, we say we go to the gym twice a week and we're doing all these exercises, but we're doing them so wrong without guidance that in the end we're not actually doing any good. And I think that's something been a big change that I've done the last couple of months, especially the last 2 years. I've picked up a lot of injuries, and it's been very frustrating of picking up stress fractures and then tendinopathies and another stress fracture and tearing this and tearing that.
Oh my goodness.
It just came down to me spending time in the gym and not doing things correctly. And the big change I've made over the last few months is starting to work with the bio. And obviously seeing where all my little problems are, because like I said, we was increasing the Ks to 140, 150 Ks a week, and I felt really good. But then all those weaknesses started coming out. I started getting problems here and there, and was no longer able to be consistent. And I think working with the bio now, we've been able to start picking up all these little problems and all these little weaknesses and actually working on them properly. And now when I'm doing an exercise alone, that the bio has showed me, I can feel I can feel myself activating my back and not my hamstring. Like, why is my hamstring not firing? Go back to a simpler exercise, make sure that hamstring is firing. You go back to the more complicated exercise and make sure that it's happening correctly, you know. And I think that's a big problem that we have, is we spend time in the gym, but we don't do it properly. And then, I think as a steeple runner, I learned very quickly that if you aren't strong, you're definitely not going to be able to get over those hurdles. They might not seem very high in the beginning, but they get higher and higher as the tighter you get. So that was also really important, and we've worked a lot on starting to work those sort of plyometric exercises into training. I think also any athlete, if you can work on speed, but another way to work on your power and your speed actually is by working on power in the gym. So that ratio of power and speed are so close.
Yeah.
You know, if you're working on power outage stuff in the gym, it will come out. You'll see the benefits of that in your speed on the track or on the field or wherever you are. So there's quite a close relation, just in terms of not even strength to like jump, just pure actual, that power to speed ratio is it makes a big difference. So you'll see a lot of the sprinters, like that track and field sprinters, tops of the world, they spend a lot of time obviously on the track working their speed, but they also spend almost half of their time in the gym working purely on power, because the speed comes from the power in the gym.
So before you jump in, because I know you probably have a burning question to ask your sister, but there's something you touched on there which I'm really curious about, which is you alluded to some injuries like stress fractures and those kind of things, and it sounded like you're alluding that you could remedy that by preparing in a gym. Am I hearing that correct? Is there training you can do in a gym to help you with a bone style injury like that?
So a bone style injury is coming from two things: overload, but also overload because of something biomechanically that was wrong.
Okay.
So why were you loading an area in the bone more? Was it because you were running or you were doing something in the incorrect manner? So did you get a bone injury on the outside of your foot because you were striking wrong, because your glutes are too weak to make sure that your foot is striking correctly? Makes sense.
Yes.
So obviously load, it plays a role. If you're doing too much, that's always going to play a role, and your nutrition is also 100% going to play a role. But also the reason the load is incorrect in a certain area can also be because of weaknesses, because you're not doing actual exercise, or running or you're training correctly because of imbalances in your muscles.
Okay, interesting. Because I also coach sprinting, and it's part of the preseason programs that I do for Frisbee. But last year during lockdown, I trained with a professional coach. So I was doing a lot more sprinting than I've ever done in my life. And I started developing, it felt like bruising on the left side of the ball of my foot area, so the knuckle area behind the toes. And I assume it's something like that. I assume I pronate the wrong way with the foot strike because of some kind of imbalance. Okay, I'll look into that. Thank you.
Pleasure.
So, Cherise, I've lived with you.
That's not a question.
I mean,
and it wasn't a very fun time in my life, because you're always training and someone always has to go with you. Okay, understandable. But that then,
the Sims boot camp.
Yeah, I go home to boot camp. I don't go home to relax. So how do you balance that work-life kind of thing? I mean, you're one of the I remember you once said that you went doing the Spa Ladies Night Race. I can't remember exactly what it's called. You're one of the only ladies in the top 10 that actually had a job. And that kind of goes to the whole, all the other elite level athletes are training twice a day and putting in all this time, but you're training twice a day, waking up at 5, going to bed at 9, so you can ensure that you that you can do this. And the few times that I did train with you, I broke down physically for the next few days. So how do you do that? How do you manage that work-life balance, or work-life exercise balance?
Obviously, it's taken some time for me to kind of get my this balance right, and it kind of, I guess, started at varsity because I've always been someone who's overcommitted to everything, so I've had to learn to really manage my time, and I think that's been really important. And shame, I feel sorry for him. He's a really, he's very understanding to my running, because it is difficult just in general because it's such a big commitment. So it basically comes down to just pure passion and commitment to what I love, and I love running, so I will always make time for it, and it means me managing my time really well. So most times in the evenings, I pack my bag for the morning, so it's got my clothes to go to my run clothes, my bio clothes, my clothes for work, my breakfast is packed, my lunch is packed, and then my training clothes for the afternoon is packed. So I've basically got my whole boot full of stuff, and so I pre-pack everything in the evenings, that when I get up, I go straight for my run. I change my outfit, I pack in my, pack my bag, I pack everything in my car, I head off to the bio. From the bio, I shower and change there, head straight to work. From work, I go straight to training. I train, I change, I coach, and I head home. So it's basically just comes down to pure planning of my day, and that's why I really don't like it when people are late for things, because if I'm half an hour out somewhere, it messes up my whole day. But it just comes down to really planning my day well, and no excuses at the end of the day. I might have this rushed crazy day and I don't feel like training in the afternoon, but it has to be done. And I think sometimes the best thing is not to go home. That's my advice to everyone that's very tempted not to train, is pack your bag for training and go straight to training. Don't go home, because if you go home, you're tempted to sit on the couch, have that cup of coffee and that rusk, and then you don't want to go anymore. So that's I've had that. You come home and you're like, oh, I don't feel like going for this run right now. Sometimes it's just best to go straight to training. But so that's basically almost my everyday is bags, and I've got a whole 3 or 4 bags lined up ready to get into the car, because there's so much stuff to take with me every day. I live out my boots a little bit, but that's just my everyday.
I remember, I heard a rumor that you didn't shower before going to work. Obviously, that rumor has changed. Now you do shower before going to work. I'm glad.
I do most days shower, I promise. Depends how tired the time is.
So, okay, also you're a physio.
Full of grapes sometimes,
and
yeah.
you go to
Yes,
work to
I
do
do that.
physio things. So how does that affect your sport? Obviously, you know a little bit more about the body than the general person.
I think it has its advantages, but it also can have its disadvantages. So the advantages is I understand what's happening with my body, understand, feeling something and being able to fix it. So if I have like a little niggle in my calf, I'll rub it myself, or I've done some dry needling on myself in desperate times. That was quite hard.
Wow.
In lockdown, I was like,
That's very
I
hardcore.
need
Oh
to
my
have my hip
goodness.
fixer. It was at first I was like, I said to my husband, I was like, don't you just want to push the needle in, I can do the rest. But it wasn't so bad. It was much better than I thought it was going to be. But I've done that before. I've strapped myself up and all those things, but I think sometimes it can also be to my own detriment, because first of all, we don't listen to ourselves. It's I still would rather go to a physio and I'll say, this is what I think is wrong and this is what I think you should do, but you're the physio, please treat me as if I'm not a physio. Just because I think sometimes we either underplay it or overplay it. It's hard. It's easy for me to tell someone to rest, but it's hard to tell myself to rest.
Yeah.
So I think that sometimes, I might be a physio, but I don't always listen to my own advice. I'm also a coach, so I tell people, no, you need to definitely, let's cut down the load, let's do this, but I will never tell myself to do that. So it can, I understand what's happening to me, but I also won't listen to myself. So even though I'm a physio, I still go to the physio and I make sure that I listen to her and not listen to myself, because I am not inclined to let myself rest. So yeah, but I think my coach sometimes, he also gets a bit mad. He says, as a physio, think in a different way to him as a coach. So sometimes we can butt heads a little bit, but we always get to the bottom of it.
So before we explore the physio angle a little more, I want to ask you about something you touched on way in the beginning, which is the mental part of what you do, especially on track. So if I can paint a scenario for you quickly, you're at the African Champs, there's all these Kenyan runners and so on match next to you, because you guys start, what you have for your races, you have 20 people running a race or something of the like, if memory serves me right. There's more than 8 lanes, if I remember correctly. So you have all these, some of the best athletes in the world. I imagine most of them are taller than you too. So the steeple's getting higher for you as you go. The height is getting higher for you as you go around, lap by lap. But it's definitely getting higher for you than for them, because they have a little bit of a height advantage. So considering all of that, and I'm just guessing here, how do you, in that moment when you're standing on the starting line, you're getting ready, how do you get yourself into the zone? How do you get yourself to focus on what you need to do and then run your best race? Because from what we've learned through our conversation so far, is you're really good at keeping yourself focused on doing what you have to do beforehand to make sure you run the race at your best race. That's such a big part, in my opinion, is the mental aspect, to ensure that you do that. Not just the physical preparation, but also on the day, not getting flustered by what's happening around you. So do you have a process? Do you have advice for us? How do you make that happen?
I think this is a learning thing for that I'm still figuring out myself, is just that mental aspect of training. It's and racing. It's so big, and I think especially in a long distance running, most of the time the person winning the race is not always the person who's in the best shape. It sometimes comes down to the person who's got the strongest head, because it's the person who can push themselves into the most amount of pain for the longest period of time. That comes down to something in here, and sometimes not something that the legs are doing. And that comes with mental practice. And just as much as you practice running, you need to practice the mental aspect of your sport. Whether that be, learning how to deal with the pressure of a free shot, or the pressure of whatever that may be in your sport, that's something that has to be practiced. And so for me, what I have to do is, so in my morning runs, I listen to a lot of podcasts. So that's kind of my free time and time to learn things and new techniques. So my most listened to podcast, 90% of my podcasts are sport podcasts, podcasts on I listen to interviews with other runners and them giving tips. I listen to a lot of sports psychologists giving tips on how to work that mental aspect of training. And then I try and take those things and apply it into my training sessions. And then the ones that I see work in my training sessions, I then try and bring into my races. So one of the things that I've been doing a lot is having a mantra. So a mantra for each training session, and then a mantra for each race. So I have a running journal as well, and the day that I had a hard session, I write what that mantra was that day. So it's just a phrase that I'll say to myself. So for example, I raced yesterday, and my phrase that I kept telling myself is, you are strong and you can do hard things. And I just kept on, when it was really tough and I was really digging deep because it was hard, and I just kept on saying to myself, you're strong and you can do hard things. You are strong and you can do hard things. And that in that moment was, for me that day, what could get me through that run. And so I think it's just practicing those things. And I do that in training sessions. I found little things that work for me. I break down a training session and I do it in a race too. Is I break it down into segments in my head. I have silly little things that I do that I have where I count things. So I'll count like, okay, you have 3 laps to go. That means you've only got 2 plus 1, or you've only got 1 and then actually only 2 more. Like all these weird things, ways of doing things to try and overcome the thoughts of pain and the thoughts of wanting to quit. And then just the nerves on a start line. I think over the years, I've got much better at dealing with that. When I was younger, it was something I really struggled with. I used to get very anxious on the start line. I really struggled with anxiety and getting really like worked up before I start. But I think through my years of racing, I've just started to gain a bit more confidence in the sport that I do. And something I always tell my kids that I coach, that I've started trying to remind myself of, is standing on that start line is 2 things. Is if I run badly, my life going to change. It's not going to change my day. It's not going to change my week. It's not going to change my life if I have a bad race today. And if I have a good race, it's also not going to change my day, my week, my life. So it's just to show that it's put that one race into perspective. It's not going to be the end of your world if something doesn't go the way you want. And also at the end of the day is also who you're running for. Who's this for? You need to remember your why. Why are you doing this? If you remember your purpose and you remember your why of what you're doing, then it makes the whole process a lot easier. So those are just things that I've started practicing and I do in my everyday training, and then that kind of just overflows into racing. So I think any mental tricks or things that you've heard or learn, you need to practice and then it happens in your racing automatically.
Yeah, I completely agree with especially the last bit that you mentioned regarding the why. I mean, Simon Sinek spoke about that a lot with his teachings, and he did a lot of his learning in defense force environments, which is a highly stressful environment. And I think there's similarities between that environment and the highest level of sport in terms of the stress of the occasion. So I think that's a fantastic place from which to ground yourself. But I just want to rewind a little bit. You were mentioning a mantra earlier, and I'm just curious on, do you think that maybe having that mantra helps you keep your breathing consistent? Because I find a lot of the athletes, once the occasion gets to them, once the fight or flight system starts kicking in, and you start hyperventilating and that kind of thing, you can preempt that by focusing on your breathing to keep it consistent. And obviously keeping your rituals consistent too helps a lot with that on the day, so the occasion doesn't get you when you have these Kenyans standing next to you who've just run the fastest times in the world a month ago kind of thing. Do you think that's part of it, so that the mantra helps with your breathing?
Yeah, because again, it's something that you've practiced, and then it's something that is familiar to you. So you need to kind of do what you always do and forget about the people around you. So that day, he said, I was literally running against someone who had run the world record 2 weeks before, and I was like, oh my word, she's literally the best in the world. And I was just like, okay, what is do my warm up the way I always do it. I saw them doing all these weird things. I wasn't going to change what I do. I made sure I warmed up how I always did, sparked up like I always did, and I did my rituals of remembering my mantras, remembering my why and stuff on the start line the way I always did, and then that helped keep my calm and keep me level-headed in the situation. So I think it's just practicing those things in training, and then remembering to just continue them into a race the way you normally do, and not let that pressure of the event overwhelm you.
Yeah, I agree with you 100%. I think that is, in my opinion, one of the differences between the best in the world and the rest, is that they have those consistent rituals to get them into that space. But that is what happens, and that's the structures you've built and the neurological pathways you've built over your career. How would you handle a situation where the occasion gets to you? You're on that start line, the gun is about to go, and the occasion gets to you. You notice that you're moving into that fight or flight space. Your breathing is automatically different. What can you do in that situation to get yourself back to your mantra space, back to your zone?
It is normally really difficult when you find, like, I've had that before, where I, I knew I wasn't in the best shape, and I was probably more nervous than I've ever been, going into a race, and I was the favorite to win the race because I'd won it twice before, and you kind of let all of that stuff get to you. And I did have a really bad day, and I wasn't able to pull myself back. And I think often when you get into that headspace so deep, it is so hard to pull yourself back, and sometimes you need an external person. So you have people that keep you grounded. Like, my husband is really good at keeping me grounded. He's the person that will, like, when I'm saying, like, I'm really, like, I'm not in good shape, this chick is so good, this person is this person is this, he's the person that says to me, his thing that he almost always shouts when I'm running a race is, "You're strong, you're so strong, you're so strong, you look so strong." And then I try and remind myself, okay, I am strong, I can do this, I am strong. And it's always one of my favorite things that he shouts to me, is because it's something I take in. And sometimes, you just do need those external people in your life to kind of bring you back, because I think sometimes we get ourselves so deep in our own negativity and our own anxieties that we do struggle to bring ourselves out of that. And sometimes you just do need that external support system to get you grounded, bring you back into it. And so I think it's important to have that in your sporting career. You need people around you to keep you grounded, and remind you of all the things that you're always trying to remind yourself of.
That's
sometimes you
really
just
interesting. Yeah, that's quite a different take to pretty much anyone else I've spoken about regarding this, because I mean, you'll know this better than I do, but once you get into that fight or flight space, physiologically what you want to do is you want to stimulate the vagus nerve and your parasympathetic nervous system, just to get your body to relax. I'm not sure if you're familiar with Dr. Andrew Huberman. He has a research lab at Harvard, if I remember correctly. He's doing a lot of research on how to, in the moment, remedy that. To stimulate with the vagus nerve and everything else, just to reset your system. Because the reason I mention that's why I'm leading with my questions, is I think there's a few, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. There's a few elements to being an elite athlete. One is obviously talent, physical preparation, and years of it, not just instant gratification. Go get strong in the gym. It takes years of training. The mental aspect we just spoke about in training, but also in the moment, being able to bounce back from you get kicked by an opponent while you're in the bunch and you're out of your stride and you lose some distance while you were in a good position, as I understand your running competitions require of you. In my opinion, it's really important to be able to bounce back from that, and that also sets apart the really legendary athletes from the good ones.
Yeah, I think it is a huge part of being able to be able to adjust to any situation is such an important part of being an elite athlete. If you trip in a race and you fall and you decide, well, that's my race done. Okay, cool, I'm done. You can either be that athlete, or you can be the athlete that trips and falls and says, okay, cool, up, let's go, let's catch, and that's that whole fight and flight. So you're adrenaline pumping and you're just going to leave it, or you're going to adrenaline pump, get into the group, calm down, get back into your race, and kind of be able to adjust. And that's so important, and that's something you don't often get to practice in training, because training, things don't often go wrong, and that comes through experience and time in the sport, and just practicing racing and actually racing. And it happens, I've had races where they've told us we have to run a certain time, otherwise we won't qualify, and you start the race and it's just so slow. And that's also, you can't panic. You're like, okay, well, I'm looking at the timer. What am I going to do? Am I going to do something? Am I going to go alone, or am I going to just sit at this pace and hope for the best? And, it's kind of, and as an athlete, you have to learn to adjust to those things and not panic and stay calm in those moments. And that also just comes, I think that's also a bit of a inherent thing on a person's overall, if I can say that. You get some athletes who are just, if it doesn't go perfectly, they'd rather just stop.
Yeah.
And I know quite a few athletes like that. If it's not going exactly the way they planned, but then you just have some athletes who are just inherently, they're just fighters, and those are generally the ones that in the long run do so well, because they have this attitude of, I mean, I've got a little girl that I coach at the moment, and she raced a 3,000 the other day, and within the first 50 meters she hit the ground hard. She got tripped and she basically folded over herself. It was so hectic. I was like, oh my word. But she got up and she just gunned it, and she just went for it, and her first lap was so fast, and I was like, oh my word, how did she catch up that time? It was crazy. But she's a fighter, and she showed that and it speaks a lot, because in the long run, that attitude that she has, that mentality that she has, is going to separate her from a different athlete that doesn't have that same sort of attitude. So it's something that you can practice, definitely, but I do think it is a little bit something that's naturally in people too.
Okay, makes sense. I want to ask one more question regarding this before we start shifting a little more towards ultimate, which is, you said earlier you listen to a lot of podcasts. I've the name Courtney Davolter, I think I pronounced the name correctly. Has she come across any of the podcasts you've listened to? She's an off-road ultra marathon runner in the US. She runs like the 200 milers. She's won those. I'm not sure if you're familiar with the name.
Yes, I am.
But how does someone do that? How does someone take themselves to that place where they run for, I don't even remember how many hours straight, where she slept almost nothing for a day? It's just keep on going. How do you do that?
I think those ultra marathon runners, especially those multi-stage sort of things, is pure mentality. Like, it's someone who can override pain. I mean, yeah, and it's a different kind of pain. Like, I always say to my sprinters, like, I always wish I was a sprinter, because you only have pain for about 10 seconds, well, 12 seconds, and you're done, and the pain is finished. I have to go through the pain for 12 and a half laps or 25 laps or whatever.
Yeah.
But it's a different kind of pain. But I mean, I think with those ultra runners, I think it's that slow pain for a long amount of time, and that comes down to how strong your mind is, because you have to tell yourself to just keep going and keep going and keep going. And I think they don't only physically get tired, they mentally get tired as well, because it's just hours and hours of concentration and pushing through pain. I think it's someone who's just trained their mind so strong, and I think that is sometimes not just something that they've practiced, but something that's there are certain people that are more inclined to have stronger minds. I don't know if it's stuff that they've been through in their lives, but I can see it even with certain athletes that I coach. You can see some people are just naturally able to dig so deep, and then there's other people who get on the edge of pain and they're like, I'm out. That's all I could give today. And it's something that you can practice, but I also think it's something that's just in people. I think that's something that's just in her. She's mentally just so tough.
Yeah.
And you have to be an ultra runner. You have to have that just grit and toughness. You just have to be hardcore.
Yeah, for sure. No, you're literally breaking down your body as you run.
Yeah.
Cool.
Finally back to you.
To swing this all the way around and take it to a few things that I'm going to rate ultimate. The first being the most important one. As an ultimate player myself, what is the maximum distance that I could beat you in a race? Pardon?
I don't know. I'm thinking you particularly.
Yeah, me particularly, as your brother that has pride in the land. I'm thinking like 400.
Yeah, I don't know if you could beat me on more than a 400.
500.
You think you could do like a 64 second 400?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I could do that. 100%. Easy. Do that in my sleep.
Okay.
Anyway, wait, did you say you can do a 64 second 400? Okay, no, it's
Well,
fine.
I've done one in like the end of a training session.
Okay, yeah, no, it's fine. It's fine. You can win the 400. Let's do the 100. So
So this is where we leave the podcast and go onto the field and record you two running against each other, right?
Yeah.
So there's quite a lot of things that, of course, our two sports would have in common. One in particular, I think, would be preseason. While you don't participate in preseason as much because you jump between cross country and athletics, I assume normal people would have more of a preseason. And in ultimate, we have very much of a preseason generally in the more competitive countries because they played one division. They don't play mixed and open like we do in South Africa. So what are your thoughts on preseason in particular for your sport and then also for ultimate?
Okay, so I think preseason is absolutely essential for any athlete. I think without a preseason, you can't have a season. I think if an athlete has skipped preseason, they basically have to be preseason in season, and otherwise they're just not going to, and they're going to get injured at the end of the day. And what I said earlier is if you don't have a big base, how do you build a big triangle with a peak performance? So you don't have that base of preseason. The smaller your base, the smaller your triangle. So if you've only got a base this big, your peak is not going to be very high. But if you've built that base big, the higher your peak can go. And I feel like a lot of, I mean, I'm lucky that I have cross country season that goes straight into track season. So my base is always pretty large, and it makes it a lot easier for me to build my performance on that. But I think a problem with that some of the Frisbee players have is, they just want to jump into just playing straight away. And without that preseason, that big base, suddenly they aren't able to perform for very long in the season, or they're getting injured in the season, or when it comes to a tournament that's over 3, 4, 5 days, they're just falling to pieces because that base preseason is not big enough. And I feel like if that's not there, you really can't perform in the long run. You can't. You might be able to perform on a 1-day tournament, if you're just 1-day game, but as soon as you're playing a few day tournament, you're gonna fall to pieces, I think. And I think that's been seen by a lot of clubs in South Africa. You guys have a few really high level performing clubs who do a good preseason, but I think there's a lot of other clubs that have a few players who maybe do preseason here and there by themselves, but then the players kind of all just pitch up in season and say, let's play preseason, and then they're the ones that really do struggle in the tournaments and you guys big competitions.
I mean, it's funny looking at the team that I coach. Now I'm trying to get people to start, training again after this huge lockdown period, and as soon as someone sees a frisbee, they just go, cool, let's start playing, let's start throwing, let's start doing the fun things, because I mean, quite frankly, it's not as fun doing all the preseason stuff together compared to playing. So it's difficult to find that balance between letting people have fun and want to keep coming to the practice that I'm hosting every week, and making sure that they're actually going to be strong enough for our season that is hopefully going to happen.
Yeah. No, it is hard because the preseason stuff, like I say, is not the fun stuff. Even with my sprinters, preseason is like these longer sessions when they're doing like 10 by 200s and 10 by 200 hills and 300, like things that for 100 or for a 200 or 400 meter sprinter, that's a long session and that's a lot of 200s. Whereas in season they're only doing maybe 4 200s or 5 200s. It's like a lot less, but it's a high intensity. But you can't get to the high intensity work, the sessions where you're doing these hard sprints and really working hard if you haven't built any sort of base. Because as soon as they do those sessions, pull a hamstring, we're going to get a sore foot here, or even the upper body stuff, just doing lots of throws, like basic throws. If you haven't been doing a high load on your shoulder and now suddenly you're playing a game and you're throwing these insane throws, you're going to hurt yourself if you haven't built any muscle around your joints. Your shoulders are not going to last a season. So it's small little things that people think, okay, cool, I'm just throwing a frisbee. No, you're running hard, you're throwing hard, you're moving fast. Like it's if you don't have that base of basic conditioning, you can't compete at a high level, especially not over more than 1 day.
So speaking about things that are at high level and longer than 1 day, you came with to under 24 Worlds in London in 2015 with the South African under 23 team, and you also came down to Cape Town for one of the South African Nationals. I believe it was 2016, and you were the physio of the tournament. What do you think ultimate players could be doing a bit more to compete physically at a tournament?
I think, like we said now, just having a really good preseason, to last the whole season, and then still, because obviously generally this big competition is at the end of your season. That's kind of your peak of your season. But if you haven't built up that season and then done a bit of a taper towards that competition, you can't perform. I mean, you can't have like this and then taper. I mean, we haven't gone very far, have we? Whereas if you've got that big base, you can build nice, and it's a long period. It's not just, okay, we train a month before competition and then we think we can perform. Like it's a long pool. It's a long journey to get to that point. And I think people think we can just get away with just maybe doing 2 months of work or whatever it is. It's not. It's months and months of work to get to that point. And it's not just the work with the team that's important. I think a lot of times people think going to practice twice a week and playing on a weekend is enough. It's not. You can't train 3 times a week and compete at a high level. You need to be doing work on your own. You need to be doing your conditioning with in the gym with a bio, or doing your rehab if you've had an injury before. You need to be doing your extra little bit of fitness to maintain your fitness level by going for a run or doing your sprints. Your training, because yes, you can, your group trainings are usually good, but the further you go into your season, it's more focused on your skills and stuff, and playing like the structures and what are those things called, that your calls and those things that you make. You guys focus a lot more on that, which is important. But now your fitness and your rehab, it can't end. You can't think now just because we're playing doesn't mean I must stop doing my rehab and my fitness. Those things have to continue. Yes, the load decreases a little bit because your intensity is increasing your actual frisbee, but you can't stop your rehab. You can't stop your gym work. You can't stop your extra little bit of fitness. And I think that's sometimes the problem we have. We think going to practice 3 times a week is enough. It's not. I can tell you now, I mean, I train like 15 times a week run, and so as a frisbee player, you're running, you're throwing, you're jumping. You can't think you're going to train 3 times a week to be able to do all those things. And I think at a tournament, that's seen towards the end of the tournament, because the people performing the first 2 days, and by the 3rd, 4th day, it's like, this is sore, that is sore, this person's got this knee, this foot, this shoulder, this, that. Everything is like falling apart, because under pressure, the body that is weak will fall apart. Under pressure, a body that is not conditioned, the problems come out. So, that's the.
And kind of to add to that, I mean, with now, okay, so we're gonna increase our load. We're gonna start training properly. We're gonna hit the gym. We're gonna be able to meet the 3 things that you speak about, fitness, throwing, jumping, that kind of stuff. But how does our nutrition change with this? Because if I just lived my life normally and ate like I normally did, my body's probably going to give out before I can make it to that tournament.
Yeah, I think that's also something I think noted at 24 is now competing at a higher level in sport and traveling with like the South African team. I've noticed how big a role that plays. Like when we went to Africa, all the athletes had their with them. They brought their food stuff for breakfast. They brought all their snacks with them. Even though we got food given to us there, people brought their own stuff because they know what works for their bodies and what they've been practicing on. And I think, we don't realize the big role. I've gone to a dietitian now to increase the amount of food that I've eaten, because I thought, I thought I was eating all right. But she's like, you're not taking in anything within 30 minutes of your sessions. That means your body's breaking down and you're not giving it what it needs, And I think we don't always realize you have a tournament and you hardly have eaten anything the whole day. You maybe have a couple of beers at night and you think that's your carbs. But you're not actually taking in enough in the day to restore what you've broken down. I mean, your guys' training sessions in the evenings or weekends are sometimes 2-3 hours long. You can't do exercise for 3 hours and not actually take something in during that session. I don't think I've ever seen someone take in something during your guys' actual sessions. Maybe you have some water, but in a 3-hour session, you should be having something. You should have a bite of a banana, you should have a goo, you should have a something, because you're breaking down stuff in your body and you need to replace that. And I think, the increasing your load, you have to increase your intake. It's obviously increasing your intake in the right way, giving your body what it needs, giving it the protein, but also giving it the carbs. I think everyone thinks that carbs are such a bad thing. They're not. They really are a good thing. It's the only thing to fuel you properly. But I think it's important for people to see a dietitian if they feel that, if you're feeling fatigued all the time, if you're tired all the time, you're probably not eating enough. And you don't realize how much you actually need to eat. Like, I thought I was eating a lot. Everyone's like, Cherise, you eat so much more than everyone else. You're always eating. I went to the dietitian and I told her what I'm eating, and she's like, you're not eating enough. And I was like, how? I eat so much. But for the amount of exercise that I do, it wasn't enough. And I think we don't always realize that, So I think it's so important. It's such an important part of the process. And I realized that also when I went to Africa's in 2018, when I went to Nigeria to compete for South Africa. We were there for 2 weeks, and my nutrition there wasn't good because I hadn't packed in all the extra food that I should have, and because I didn't really know, and the food we got there was not very good. We were in Nigeria, and they eat very differently to us, and I basically didn't eat protein for weeks. I ate very little. I ate mainly just dry carbs, and I didn't have enough fats. Hardly ate any fats. Hardly ate anything because the food was quite scary looking. And a few weeks after I got back from that trip, I picked up a stress fracture in my pelvis. And I definitely do think those 2 weeks of training and not fueling properly definitely contributed to me getting a stress fracture in my pelvis. So I think it is such a big part of training. You're gonna break if you don't give your body what it needs.
Okay. As one of my last questions, and I'm sure Korn might have some more.
I do.
In the kind of athletic scene, there's quite a lot of females that participate for people to look up to. In the South African ultimate scene, there definitely aren't as many females participating at the highest level, and that's just unfortunately due to lack of numbers. What advice do you have to give to aspiring female ultimate athletes to start performing at the highest level?
This is quite a difficult question. You think why do you think in general there aren't a lot of females in ultimate high performing, just in general?
So in general, I think it's because a lot of ladies that are participating at the highest level in terms of sport have already found the sport by the time they asked to come to ultimate. And it's very difficult to get someone to leave a sport that they're already good at to come play ultimate. And I think just so happens that slightly more guys are happy that aren't doing anything proper, are just happy to come try something new and then happen to stay. I might be completely wrong here, but yeah, I don't know. Also, could be that it's a mixed sport, and playing with guys isn't as desirable. That kind of stuff. I don't actually know.
I think I agree with you in that. It's I thought frisbee was fun. I thought it was cool, but why would I leave my running, which you've asked me to come play a frisbee tournament before. I'm not the worst frisbee player. I'm not amazing, but I can throw frisbee and I can run a lot, so I'm not too bad. But why would I leave a sport that I'm really good at to come play a sport that I'm right at, and I could potentially get injured for my main sport. That was always like the thing. My dad's like, don't you dare go play frisbee because you might get injured. But I think it comes probably down to the fact that there isn't frisbee at like a school level. I don't really know about it until they hit university or like social age. Like in East London, frisbee is more like a social sport. Like I know a lot of like the doctors and stuff play it that I've worked with, because it's like this cool social sport, and they like go grab some drinks afterwards, and it's just kind of seen as this like more social sport, which is good because that's a way to attract numbers and get people more competitive into it. But I think it needs to start at a younger level. So like I remember at school, because my brother played frisbee, we were trying to get frisbee started in the school, but as soon as my brother left, it kind of away. And I think if it doesn't come into a school level, it's not going to be able to bloom in a higher level, because I think at a university level, people have either already decided on a sport, or they're concentrating on their studies that they don't play a sport, and then they start working, and then if you haven't already built that passion for this thing, it's hard to have that commitment. Like we're speaking about how much commitment it is to do a sport and have the rest of your life function, balance working, your social life, and then a sport. It's hard, and you really have to be passionate about your sport to make time for it. And I think if that passion isn't cultivated at a younger age, it's harder to cultivate it at an older age, just because it's coming in so late. I think it would be a good thing to try and start it, and I know maybe Cape Town and Joburg is doing that, but I think the smaller towns, I don't even know if it's happening. I don't know, is it happening in Cape Town and Joburg, where Ultimate is the biggest? I don't know. Are they starting at a school level? Probably not. I think it would be really good, especially for the female side, to start seeing it at a younger age, because I wouldn't have known about frisbee if it wasn't for my brother. Whenever I tell my people that my brother is like a South African ultimate player, they're like, frisbee, like, pardon? And people are always almost surprised about it, unless there's not often people that know about it, to be honest, and that sucks. It sucks for you guys because it's a cool sport. I think it needs to. We really need to put initiative not only into the club level, I think more into a school level, because it starts with the youngsters. They're the ones that are going to bring it into university, and then from university into a club level.
So fortunately, we do have it in a few of our schools in Cape Town. I don't quite know about the other cities and provinces, but it should definitely become more of a priority for the South African community to introduce it there. But Corn, I hand over to you.
I think it's important for you guys. It's important for you guys, if you really want to see your sport grow, I think if it needs to be done in putting it, like getting younger people involved in the sport, because they're the ones that are going to be passionate about it at university and make sure the clubs grow and get bigger, and then those people leaving university are going to be the ones that make sure that the club at like a higher level is going to grow. So I think if we don't start with the youngsters, it's going to become an older sport, and it's that's not the way it's going to grow. If you go to the big competitions overseas, it's like young guys, it's guys at varsity and stuff that are the top guys, and we're not getting those top athletes. They're rather going to, saying that we don't have top athletes in frisbee, but you know what I mean, we could have a lot stronger team if we were able to recruit more people.
I'll add to that also that culturally we don't encourage people to keep and continue with sport after varsity. Most people, after they leave varsity, they don't, club sport is not a big thing here, whereas that's quite different in other parts of the world. A way to get around that challenge is something like the social touchies that you have across the country. We have similar things with frisbee, and I think that's another way of recruiting that we should emphasize more. But I agree with you 100% regarding the school stuff. It's really difficult. We've done a lot of work over the years, and we just need that a seed to find root and grow properly, become a program. Then we'll be fine, but we're working on that. So before we let you go, I have one last question. You spoke a lot about the shortcomings of the players you looked after at the World Championships in 2015 and the Nationals in 2016. So two complications. One is modern people sit a lot. So it's a lot of forward sitting, a lot of psoas gets shortened and those kind of things, which is definitely an issue we try and address in our warm-ups and the kind of training programs we give our players as well, because as you very well know, that affects the pelvic tilt and that affects the entire system. So that's one issue. We have people who sit a lot. And then the other issue is I can remember a teammate who will stay unnamed who would come into game huddles during a tournament holding out ibuprofen for everyone to take who needed some.
Great.
So considering those shenanigans, a lot of players, now that we're finally allowed to get back into the field, are coming from behind their laptops to start running around in the field again. What advice do you have for them, considering that Nationals if it happens, will be sometime in June? How can they best prepare themselves to not completely break themselves by June or in June?
So something that I saw that I was quite strict about it under what was it, under 24s, under 23s at Worlds, was a warm up and a cool down. And I was always like, after a game, I was like, go cool down, guys. Like,
Yeah.
And they'd be like, oh, Cherise, like get so cross with me, and I would make them run around the field like 2 or 3 times and do some stretches, and they would get so grumpy with me. But it's something we just don't do. Like, we arrive at a game or we arrive at like a practice, and we just want to like jump straight into it, and it doesn't work that way. Like, you've been all day, like you said, like you've been behind a desk all day. When you arrive at practice, like, do your warm-up properly, do activations for your glutes and your hamstrings, and rotator cuff activations for your shoulders. Do your dynamic stretching, and like I know you guys are really good at that stuff, but I don't think we are like religious about it. It's important. Like, you can't think that you're just going to catch up and just start playing, and just start like with doing a drill, because even a drill, you need to warm up before a drill. You need to activate your muscles. You need to make sure those muscles are warm, and I think that's often something. Just the first part of your question in terms of someone who's sitting most of the day, because that's what our jobs entail. And then I think the second part is being able to get through the season without hurting ourselves. It's just that consistency. Anyway, that you're going to get through a season without getting hurt is to be consistent before that season. That pre-season has to be consistent. Again, that base is the reason that you're going to have a high performance peak. And if we're not working hard before, building up into the season, we're not going to have a successful season without injuries. We need to try get consistent. And the important thing as well with that is, in that base period, is not to ramp up your base as well. Like, you can't suddenly go from you haven't been training at all to like, okay, we're going to train 5 days a week straight away. Like, you have to build up the consistency gradually. You can't think you're going to suddenly run a 10K every day. If you haven't been doing anything, you're going to get yourself hurt. It's to build gradually as well. You can't start with sprints straight away as well if you haven't conditioned your muscles. So it's a process, and it's a long process, and it's frustrating, and it's boring, and it sucks a little bit. But if you don't do that stuff, that slow build up in your preseason, and it has to be consistent, because you're going to pick up niggles if you do it too fast. You're going to pick up injuries if you try and do that preseason too fast as well. So it needs to be a slow and consistent build, and your season will be change anything. It'll be consistent, and that's the only way you're going to get through a season without injuries. And it's hard to get through a season without injuries. Sometimes it's freak injuries, especially in Frisbee. There's a lot of freak injuries, diving and tackle, people hitting into people and hurting ankles and landing, and all those things are, you can't control. You can be super strong, super fit, and those things can happen. But in terms of overuse injuries, those are very preventable if we do our season right.
So one last question: How did you do in your race yesterday?
So I won it.
Oh, congratulations.
But super impressive. We came off a high mileage week, so my coach said not to expect anything big, and yeah, I was happy with it for now, but it wasn't anything spectacular.
I want to add to that. How many people participated in this race?
I think there's only like 8 girls. I did beat some of the guys though, which was cool. I like beating guys.
Okay, I was
Oh,
about
wow.
to say, like, was it only one girl, just you? But it's fine. At least you beat other people.
I beat some others.
Cool. So next time that I'm in East London or you're in Cape Town, we will record the match, the race that we have, and we will post it somewhere. We will run until you
Beat
pass me, and then we will know how far it is.
Okay, cool. Okay, that sounds like a good idea. I'm in.
I'd be happy as well, because then you can start slow and pass me after like a K. We'll be fine.
I'm not gonna start slow. I'm gonna catch you straight away.
But yeah, Cherise, it was great having you here, having your insights of another sport against us, and really just teaching us what it means to be a proper athlete instead of what we sometimes do in ultimate, thinking that we're doing it properly. But I mean, hearing your story, it's very often not. So definitely an inspiration to pick up the slack and start training properly. And yeah, I'm pretty sure from both of us, Corn and myself, we appreciate your insights.
Thanks for having me. It was nice to chat with you guys.
That concludes this episode. Thank you so much to Cherise for giving us some time on a Sunday. And I mean, I know there's so many insights I can take away from this to boost my own training, especially as hopefully we get to play a mixed nationals tournament this year. Consistency is a big takeaway for me there, and I'll remind myself of that again going forward. A reminder that we have an Instagram account on which you can follow us. The handle is at Dishy_Switch. And besides that, we will see you on the field to play pickup soon. And we're looking forward to that. Cheers.
Cheers, everyone.